Now that we've wrapped up the middle of the chassis, we're going to go ahead and move on to the rear pod. It's a floating design with a rear V-link assembly. This V-link assembly again controls the rear roll center. So to start, we're going to grab our 7075 pod plate and our 3D printed aluminum motor plate and rear bearing carrier. These parts are already pre-drilled, pre-tapped, pre-reamed for the bearings, so everything should fit really nicely. To mount the motor plate, there's going to be one M3x8 countersunk screw on the back. So that's the right side, the passenger side of the car. We're going to go ahead and install this guy. For this front screw here, it is an M3x8 button head screw. Some thread lock on there. And then we'll go back in an alternating pattern and tighten these down until they're tight. Okay. The rear bearing carrier similarly is an M3x8 countersunk screw in the rear. So that is this hole right here. On the bearing carrier, there is a recessed pocket. That recessed pocket needs to go on the outside. This recessed pocket is to account for the flanged bearing thickness. So I can show you that here in a second. So for the front screw, we're going to use M3x8 button head, and that goes in this hole here. Okay. So on the rear bearings for the rear axle, the kit doesn't come with a rear axle, but it is designed to use any 1/4 inch axle design. So it includes these 2 1/4 by 1/2 inch flanged bearings, and you can see that there's a pocket on the outside of both the motor plate and the bearing carrier, and the flange goes into that pocket. So it snaps in there really nice. For this build, I'm not going to put a rear axle in the car, but essentially the rear axle would go through the passenger side and a clamping hub would go on the left side. So for the next step, this V-link mount that we made earlier with the threaded balls, we're now going to install this onto the rear pod. There's an open slot here, and you can see there's a similar groove for this V-link mount, and we're going to basically slide these 2 pieces together like that. So to mount these 2 together, we're going to use 2 M3x8 button heads. So for the rear droop, that's controlled by a rear droop screw on the back of the pod. It's a threaded hole with an M3 thread. So to set the droop, it's a M3x12 set screw. So go ahead and put some thread lock on that guy. And I want to thread this down for asphalt to where the set screw is about 1 millimeter exposed at the top or at the bottom of the rear pod, so you can see that there's just a little bit exposed. All right, so now we will get the rear wing mounts installed. So there's 2 plastic wing mounts. They're the same left and right, and to secure these down to the chassis will be 4 M3x8 countersunk screws, and these 4 screws here in the back of the pod plate are intended for the rear wing. this a final cross torque. Cool, so rear wing mounts are installed. The next components we're going to go ahead and get put together is the rear V-link itself. The rear V-link is constructed of 4 Traxxas ball cups and 2 M3x12 set screws. So to put this together, we're going to take the M3x12 set screw and one of the ball cups and start threading one end into the other. Once there's about that much, or perfectly 6 millimeters ish, we're going to stop and leave it exposed like that. And then I like to take some bearing oil. In this case, I really like the R1 ceramic bearing oil, and apply oil to the exposed threads. We're going to take one of the other ball cups and we're going to thread the open end into the set screw until there's no more gap in the middle. And then we're going to need both ball cup ends facing in the same direction. And this is one V-link. So then we're going to repeat the process for the other V-link. Cool, so that's the second guy. So that's it for the V-links. They're not super difficult. Using the bearing oil really helps just make sure that one side starts to self-tap and the other side stays in place. So now that we have both of these V-links done, we're going to go ahead and snap them onto the V-link mount attached to the rear pod. So like that. And these should move pretty freely. Cool. So we got both of them on there. So now we're ready to put this onto the main chassis. So here's our main chassis from earlier. And to get this installed, the first thing you have to keep in mind is this elongated hole here is for the bump spring. So you want the M3x35 screw to go through that elongated hole. The other thing to watch out for is if you have a link dangling like this, it can be hard to get it aligned. So you want to make sure both of them are basically upright. I like to put my thumb over it like this and then drop it down onto the assembly. Basically something like that. And then you can go ahead and grab those two V-links and put them onto the corresponding balls on the tower. So that guy there and that guy there. So you can see this is all secured now. Now we're going to put the torsion bar screws onto the rear pod, so you can see the balls here and the ball here mount up with the countersunk screws corresponding to the rear pod. These are secured with 2 M3x6 countersunk screws. And we're going to go ahead and thread lock these guys in as well. Okay, cool. So the rear pod is basically installed on the rear end. So our side links are already hooked up. The V-link is already hooked up. You should be able to feel spring tension side to side. There will be no spring tension up and down, and that's because we don't have the rear bump spring on there yet. So we can install the rear bump spring now. There's 3 springs that are included. They may or not be painted. I'm messing around with different paint formulas and I haven't really found one yet that I like. There is a 0.5 wire diameter, a 0.6 wire diameter, and a 0.7 wire diameter, obviously soft, medium, and hard. Pretty much everywhere we've been running this medium spring. So these, the soft and the hard are included, but we've pretty rarely ever had anybody run those. So to mount this to the rear pod, there is a little hat bushing. It's 3D printed. It's got a quite large hole on it. I think it's around 4 or 5 millimeters. Yeah, 4 millimeters. So we want to put this over the bump spring screw with the hat facing upwards, and that's going to keep the spring centered. So for this build, we're going to go with the medium 0.6 spring. So you can see here, it's basically floating in there. And then this is our spring cup and spring retainer. It's basically a hat bushing, and it's got a hex pattern to it, so that way you can get your fingers on it, and this is what's controlling your rear ride height. So the farther down this goes, the higher the rear ride height is. The farther up this goes, the lower the rear ride height is. Now we've got the rear bump spring installed, I like to turn down the spring cup until there's a couple millimeters showing. That's usually a pretty good starting point for the rear ride height. So just know that this is going to change once you get the car all put together. Okay, so next up we're going to install the center rear damper disc assembly. So this car uses a damper disc for both the up and down damping and the left and right damping. So there's some things to note about the damper disc. Typically we start with 10K, that's kind of my go-to. Going down to 5K will make the rear end reaction seem a little bit quicker. Vice versa, if you want the car to react maybe a little bit slower, you think your front tires are a bit too aggressive, you can go to something like 20K and sort of artificially numb the quickness or steering response of the car. So to get this put together, we have some 3D printed damper plate, damper discs. We have a spacer here. It's a countersunk spacer, keeps everything centered. An M3x30 flathead screw, 2 what are essentially kingpin springs, and this is what's going to keep tension on the damper disc assembly, and 2 M3x8 button heads that secure the plate down to the chassis. So first things first, I take the M3x30 screw, I take the countersunk washer and slide it over the end. That basically makes this a large surface for the spring and everything to rest on. I take one of the springs, put it over the top so that it's resting on the washer, like that. After that, I take one of the damper discs, slide that over top, and you have an assembly that should look like that. So now we can apply oil to our plate. It doesn't need to be a lot of oil, just a couple drops on either side. So again, this is 10,000 CST. So you can basically do a few pea-sized drops on each side. 10K is slightly thick, so depending on the bottle, you may have to squeeze harder than others. So it's basically four globs like that, and I'll take my finger and spread it around. There are grooves printed into the plate, so that does help retain quite a lot of oil. So after it's all spread around like that, you're ready to start assembling. So this disc is reversible top and bottom, so it doesn't matter which side faces up. So we'll take this assembly that we just constructed and we'll put that through the slotted hole. And it should rest in there like that. Then I put my index finger over and hold each side of the plate, and I'll flip it over. And then that's where I can install the other plate and the other spring. So it should kind of look like this sort of sandwiched assembly with the disc in the middle. So to get this mounted to the car, this M3x30 screw is going to mount into this center hole here on the roll center tower. So I like to install this screw first before I do the 2 screws in the back. Getting in this screw started, making sure everything is square is more important. So I'll go ahead and install that now. Once the screw is started and the assembly is not going to go anywhere, it's not all the way tight yet, I'll go ahead and install the 2 M3x8 button heads. These button heads don't have to be completely torqued all the way down, they just need to be snug. These button heads aren't a structural part of the car, so you don't want them to be free floating, but they don't have to be crushed down either. Okay, so now that the plate is mounted to the rear pod mount, we can see in this torsion assembly that this spacer is free floating, it's moving, there's a lot of movement. You can even maybe see some gaps in the damper disc to the plate. So we want to go ahead and tighten this down more. So you want it so that basically both discs are sandwiched up against the plate at full droop and at full compression. So you can see here that everything kind of moves all together in one assembly. So it should feel pretty uniform. Damping should feel nice and smooth. And again, you shouldn't see any gaps develop on the damper discs. If you do, then this screw is likely not tight enough.